One. Well, hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. I got a deep question that on the surface doesn't even really make sense. I'm just going to tell you that up front. At least it didn't for me. So if it does for you, more power to you. I had to kind of stop and think about it for a little bit before it really started to resonate with me. And so that might happen for you today, but stick with us because there's a great underlying explanation for what the question is. So it's a true or false, just so you get a 50-50 chance of getting it right. Then want to make it easy for you today. But the question is true or false. True business growth starts from within. And I wrote a book about business growth, and we spent some time talking about the team and some time talking about the customer experience. But I have to say, there wasn't a ton of time spent about something from within. So I'm like, I got to find out who in the world asked that question because it's intriguing. It's going to be a super fun episode to unpack this. And I'm honored to be hanging out with Jason Moss. How are you today, my friend?
I'm good, man. I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So you are a business mentor, and I think that the word mentor probably gives people a lot of different ideas. So just from your perspective, what does mentorship mean to you when you talk to people, on a day-to-day basis? If you can kind of unpack that for us, that'd be a great place to start.
Yeah, when I started helping other entrepreneurs, I called myself a business coach for years. And I would say about a year and a half ago, made the transition into seeing myself as a mentor, really an internal identity shift that also carried through in the work that I do. And I would say the difference between those two things is coaching is more about helping someone unpack their way of thinking, their mindset. It's more ground level guidance and someone who's really like in the weeds more so with you, like being able to really help you shift limiting beliefs. And it's a more active form of guidance.
Okay.
Whereas mentorship is the capacity to help and guide through one's own experience through sharing lessons and stories about journeys that I might have walked through as an entrepreneur.
Okay.
And it's more of a high level way of supporting someone, where really what you're doing as a mentor is more holding a field through your own expression that basically allows someone else to rise. It's like some of the most powerful, expansive experiences I've always had as an entrepreneur have been getting in the room with someone who just thinks differently than me and
Sure.
hanging out with an entrepreneur who's at a different level. And it's not so much that they're in the weeds, like helping me with my business. It's more so that I can just sit down with them and spend an hour with them and hang out and through osmosis start to absorb the way that they think about the world. And
Sure.
that helps me calibrate to a new level of my own expansion in my business. So it's a different way of guiding and supporting someone. I think there's definitely value in both, but that would be really the work that I do today is more about really holding that field for somebody else to be able to rise through my own expression and being, essentially.
Sure. So in those spots, Jason, when you start working with people early on, do you notice that they would have a lot of blind spots, a lot of limiting beliefs? Are those some of the things that kind of the baggage that a lot of us would carry into this type of relationship to start with?
Yeah, it's the whole thing as I see it. Because I've been building business online for like, 20 years now.
Okay.
And I spent probably most of that time focused on strategy and tactics and what I would call the external, which is how do I find the right marketing strategy? What do I need to
Sure.
fix or change in my business in order to get more clients or increase my revenue? And those things are important, don't get me wrong. But what I started seeing as I started working with more entrepreneurs, and I've supported over 1,000 at this point, and walked the journey with them in all sorts of different niches all over the world. And what I would see is I would give the same strategy to two different entrepreneurs, and one entrepreneur would take that exact strategy and they double or triple their business, and the other person's same strategy
Yeah.
would stay exactly where they are. And so for a long time, I was very focused on strategy. But I started seeing this again and again and again, where there was a wide variance of results from the people who were taking that same strategy. And that really drove me to dive deeper and to ask myself some deeper questions around like what actually is the thing that is number one causing that variance, and number two is responsible for the real, traction and growth of the most successful entrepreneurs that I've mentored. And what I started understanding over time in both my own journey as well as in mentoring others is that strategy is really like the tip of the iceberg. It's important. We need the right strategy. We need the right scaffolding to be able to grow and scale. But
Hmm.
ultimately, the thing that's underneath it, the thing that ultimately is responsible for that strategy being successful is our identity, it's our belief systems, it's the internal stuff that makes the strategy work or not work. And so you could have the best strategy in the world, but if you've got limiting beliefs that say, for example, making money is hard, or if you have a story that if you make more money than all of your friends around you, then you're going to lose the love and belonging of the people you care about most. Your subconscious mind will self sabotage and will not allow you to create the growth that your conscious mind actually wants. So, as I started doing this work on a deeper level and really starting to understand what actually does make the difference, we talked about this idea about building businesses from within, right? You
Yeah.
mentioned at the beginning of the episode. And what I started really understanding was that the business that you have is a perfect match always for who you are on the inside. It's just a mirror. And so,
Okay.
so many of us as entrepreneurs, we spend 99% of our time focused on the outside, trying to
Hmm.
change the strategy, trying to figure out the right plan. And when I started shifting my focus from what do I do on the outside to create the growth I want to how do I become the kind of entrepreneur who can hold that next level of success, what I started realizing was as I expanded internally, the business would naturally rise to meet me. So it's a different way of operating and it's a
Sure.
completely different shift in focus.
Sure.
But there's so much possibility on the other side of that for so many entrepreneurs.
Sure. Well, and I think that, like you mentioned, Jason, most people listening right now, they day in and day out, their focus is on the external. Their focus is on that little chunk of iceberg that's above the water, and there's this big chunk underneath that, we might occasionally tap into if we are at a seminar or, something like that happens. We might find a book that is really, touching us to the point where it's internal. But I mean, like, what does that even mean in today's world? Because the average person that's listening right now, Jason, is, working on finding ways to grow sales, finding ways to, improve their team, maybe improve their customer experience. They're trying to do these ancillary things for their business, thinking that if I do these things, if we build it, they will come, so to speak. But a lot of times we forget to, really look internally. We're just, it's too, I don't know if it's painful. I don't know even what the right word is, but for whatever reason, it kind of gets pushed aside. So for you to tell somebody listening right now that's like, wow, I never even really thought about it from an internal perspective. Where's like a easy starting spot for us to kind of, just maybe take an inventory, something to be able to increase that awareness. Where do you normally start with people like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first thing is just to put it in context and perspective as something that matters because it's so easy to focus on the stuff that's tangible. And you're right in that the inner work is it's mushy, it's sometimes it's painful. It's not as easy as just looking at something very tangible and specific on the outside. But as an entrepreneur, and this is probably language that many folks who are listening will identify with, I'm always thinking about leverage. And to me, leverage is just like how can I put the least amount in to get the most amount in return? And so
Okay.
there's many different ways leverage shows up in business, right? We can look at leverage in terms of our sales process and figuring out how to create a better offer to make every sales call we do more effective, or leverage marketing to be able to communicate with more people at once so we don't have to be having one-to-one conversations. And there's so many different ways to scale through leverage, but leverage is really the foundation of what it takes to actually grow a business. But a lot of people stop. They look at leverage on the outside, and I'm like, the
Right.
highest point of leverage in a business is you, because everything you do is filtered through who you are, your perspective, how you see your business, the problems you think you have, the way that every interaction that you have in your business is filtered through your own identity, your own belief systems, your own internal state. So the first thing is just to realize that actually if you're taking that leverage focused approach and you're just like, where can I focus on to get the most return? It's 1000% internal. It's not external.
Okay.
So that's the first thing, is like we got to value it. We got to see it that way, because most people don't see it that way. We're all focused on the outside. So I think that's the first thing. And then where do you start? A lot of the work that I do in unpacking this with entrepreneurs starts with identity, because my belief and what I've seen is that the business that you have is a perfect match to who you believe that you are. In other words, your identity. And your identity, we could say, is like, it's how you see yourself. It's the beliefs that you have. It's how you hold yourself. It's your point of view or perspective on who you think you are. So, for example, when I was scaling from six to multiple six figures, the thing that really shifted for me first, before really the strategy locked in, was I started seeing myself as an entrepreneur who was making $500,000 a year in sales. And before then, I saw myself as an entrepreneur who was making six figures. So everything that I was doing in my business was a function of that identity. And
Okay.
as soon as I made that shift, I'll give you a great example to make this more specific. So I'm at a business conference. This was maybe a month and a half ago. And I am one of in the middle of the business conference, there's this woman who goes up. She walks us through this kind of like guided visualization experience. And as I'm having this experience, I have this image of myself on stage as like almost like this like monk. It was a really interesting like image. And I'm sitting on stage, and I'm in this room with like tens of thousands of people, and I'm holding this room, and I'm on stage in this room. And I realized in this moment, and it was very emotional for me. Actually, I had to step out of the room. But I realized that this was like a image from like my future. It
Hmm.
didn't feel like just something that I was imagining. It felt like this is what you're destined to be.
Okay.
And as soon as I had that image, as soon as I had that shift in identity that was associated with that image, because now I saw myself in a completely different way. It was like I had that image, and then suddenly it was like, oh, I'm no longer even a mentor. I'm this like visionary leader who's the person who's on stage in front of tens of thousands of people. It completely recontextualized how I saw my entire business. And I looked at everything that I was doing through the lens of that identity. And then it was like, well, 80% of the things that I was doing, I was like, you should not be doing this anymore, Jason. You need to hire a team to do this. You need to be focused on this, this, and this instead. And that lens of just stepping into a different identity gave me a completely different perspective on my time, on what my time was worth, on where I was focusing my efforts, on what I needed to hire for. And all of that cascaded out just as a result of seeing myself differently. So when I work with entrepreneurs, and let's say an entrepreneur comes to me who's at six figures, they want to scale to multiple six figures or multiple six figures to seven figures. The first thing I ask them is, what decisions would you make? How would you move through this day as that person? So
Hmm.
if you want to make seven figures, you wake up in the morning and you spend 5 minutes closing your eyes and you imagine what it's like to move through your day as a seven-figure entrepreneur. And then when you're thinking about making decisions in your business, you ask yourself, would a seven-figure entrepreneur make this decision that I'm about to make? And how would a seven-figure entrepreneur be spending, how would their calendar be structured? And you start running all of these decisions through the filter of that new identity. And it's like the business will scale itself just through you holding that identity because it's the highest point of leverage, right? You could spend all your day in strategy land, but if you just shift the identity, you'll naturally make decisions and actions that are aligned with that new level. And over time, the business will expand to match it. So that's an example of what that might look like on a practical level, really asking yourself, like, okay, what do I want to create? And then who's the
Yeah.
person that actually creates that? And starting to live your life through the lens of that identity filter can be an incredibly powerful way to create change in a business.
Well, and I love that piece there. I think there's some not confusion, but people are going to be listening right now, Jason, and they're like, all right, I don't know what a seven-figure person is supposed to think like. I don't know what I don't know. So whether, again, the worst blind spot is that I see people have is someone saying that others have it, and you don't. That's like the worst blind spot in the world to say, I don't have any blind spots. I mean, it's a tough spot. For people that really truly don't know, is that kind of then where you guys jump in on your mentoring side and you sit with somebody that's like, I almost envision them, Jason, as like a blank sheet of paper where it's like, I have no clue. So I'm going to start with a blank sheet of paper and let's kind of recreate this person. Let's recreate this identity, this belief system. Is that kind of where you guys jump in and help people? Because I got to believe there's a lot of people sitting right now going, that's great, Jason, but I have no clue where to even start. I don't even know what that looks like because I'm, again, paying rent, finding a sales professional, blah, 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 blah. So is that where you guys kind of come in along the journey with somebody?
Yeah, and I think that's a super valid, concern. It's like, hey, if I've never been around someone who's made seven figures, if I don't know anyone in my life who is
Right.
operating at that level, it can feel like a leap. And this is where there's different ways to tap into this. Mentorship is, I mean, there's definitely one way to do it. And for me, just when I look back over my own journey, I've had so many great mentors and I've invested so much into just getting in the room with people who are operating at the level that I want to go. And
Yeah.
through osmosis, through being around them, through listening to how they think and learning about how they see the world, it becomes much easier to step into that identity in myself. So that's one way you can do it for sure. I mean, there's so many books out there, there's podcasts, there's resources, just finding a way that you can surround yourself in some way with people who are at that level. And then over time, you can start to borrow their identity. Like sometimes I would ask myself, I have a mentor, his name is Scott. And so sometimes in my business, I would ask myself when I was thinking about making a decision before I really stepped into the identity myself, it would be like,
Yeah.
well, what would Scott do here? And
Sure.
that would be a great filter I could use to start to tease out,
Gotcha.
decisions. And so that's another way you might get into this. And
Okay.
there's different ways for sure that we can start to expose ourselves to. But I mean, look, we got the internet, we got books. You can literally just buy half a dozen books from autobiographies from multimillionaires or billionaires and
Yeah.
listen and hear their own stories about the way that they think and see the world. So there's so many great ways that we can expose ourselves to new ways of thinking and new
Sure.
identity structures that we can bring into our life.
Well, and I think you bring up a really good point, Jason, on this is that the people around us are really going to be important at this spot. I remember, before I wrote my book, Growing on Purpose, I asked somebody about their book journey, and they asked me point blank, how many people in your phone right now have wrote an Amazon #1 best-selling book? And I look at my phone and I'm like, you're the only one. And they said, until you get five people in there that wrote a book and that are going in the direction, and I don't know if there's anything magical about five, but there was just an intentionality for me to go find people then that were on that journey. And then once I found five people, they were in my phone. And, again, it's not like a magic formula. It just made it that much easier because I was surrounding myself with people like that. So in this case here, for a lot of us get into the entrepreneurship journey because we want to call our own shots. We want to be in charge of our own life, blah, blah, blah. It's all about kind of us at first. Hopefully it changes over time. But how do you help that person that kind of is on an island and that's where they're used to? How do you kind of implement them into a group, so to speak, or are they okay by themselves? I mean, all you mentioned was talking about others around you helping you. That's to me what a mentor, coach,
Yeah.
counselor, whatever words you want to use. So, are there people that you've run into that are really standoffish and they really resist trying to get part of a group or part of a CEO roundtable or whatever it is? Do you see people still resisting that today?
Well, I was one of those people, I would say.
Uh-oh.
You know, when I first got started, I was very much a proud DIYer. And I was the guy who I saw myself as smart and capable. And I really had this mindset that I was going to go figure things out and do things myself. And I remember I had a very close friend of mine at the time we were running businesses. We were pretty much at the same level. Like we were both making around six figures. And I remember he called me up one day and he told me, he's like, I just invested $30,000 into hiring my first business mentor.
Yeah.
And I thought I was like, you're crazy, man. You just made the dumbest decision of your life. Like, that's crazy. You just threw away all that money.
Yeah. There you
What was
go.
fascinating was, well, first of all, actually, I don't think that first investment really like played out for him, but he ended up investing again and he just kind of kept going. And so what started to happen was we were kind of on the same level in terms of revenue. And then I watched as he just started surrounding himself with people who were playing a much bigger game. And
Yeah.
over the course of several years, he went from making six figures to doing about $250,000 a month. And I
Wow.
ended up working for him and with him as a
Sure.
director of sales, leading his sales team in what became a multi seven figure business that's still running today. And after coming out the other side of that experience, I had this moment where I just witnessed it. I was like, okay, here's someone who, I mean, we're close friends. I was one of the groomsmen at his wedding. Like, I feel I'm very much like I see who he is, and he's
Sure.
more special than me.
Yeah.
And yet he's been able to create so much more. And what allowed that to happen, it was really just his capacity to be in the room. And that was when things really started shifting for me. And I started saying, okay, well, I can do things myself, but if I can find someone who is playing at another level, who can help me go faster, who can show me something that I don't know, then why would I not take that opportunity? And I've
Sure.
invested, I mean, probably around $300,000 at this point into hiring mentors and coaches and business programs. And I'm like, so I mean, I wouldn't tell anyone to do something I'm not doing myself today. So for
Sure.
me, and there's no way I would have been able to grow and scale past 500,000 a year in sales had I not had those opportunities to just be surrounded with people who are thinking differently. So at some point, like my own mindset around that really started to shift. And I think the
Sure.
biggest thing for me was just seeing my friend go through that experience and
That's great.
seeing, wow, like,
Yeah.
there really is no difference between us. He's just making different decisions. And
Right.
that's leading to different results. So if I want those results, I could probably do that too if I just made similar decisions.
Right. Wow. That's so cool. People get nervous when they hear these big dollar amounts that people invest, and whether it's 30,000 to start or whatever, maybe again, maybe it's like Jason said, maybe you just buy a book. Maybe you just listen to a YouTube video, a TEDx talk, whatever it is. But I think it's important for us to look internally. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to kind of dig into that deeper because, there are people right now, Jason, that are like, all right, where do I start? I understand it matters. And I understand about this business identity piece. So we'll dig into it deeper when we come back. Welcome back. I'm honored to be hanging out with Jason Moss, business mentor. and ex-coach. Are you a recovering coach, or do you still do a little coaching, or what do you think of the coaching side now?
I do whatever I need to get the job done. So, I love coaching, and if that's what's needed in a conversation, that's where we go.
Cool. Awesome. Well, you mentioned identity, and you mentioned it a few times. I'm guessing right now, people listening, Jason, they're identifying as a business owner. They're identifying, as an external, something external rather than something internal. It's funny when like you go to a networking event, people tell you they own this company or they do that. They never say I'm a husband or I'm a father, I have great kids. It's interesting how, and I don't know if it's a guy thing, so I kind of wanted your opinion on that, but it feels like it's really more about, showing off my all my accolades than it is really, hey, who I am as an individual. I don't get that deep into it with people in a like in a networking situation. And I'm just curious from your perspective, like when you're meeting with people, do you get deep into their life pretty quick, or how do you navigate those waters?
I mean, I tend to go very deep with people because my experience is that there is no business. We just think there is. And what you're really just seeing is yourself in all these different ways. Like for a long time, I thought these different spheres of my life were separate, and how I was in my relationship and how I was in my work and how I was with my health. And over time, I started realizing as that collapsed, that really all I have is just John Kabat-Zinn, where it says, wherever you go, there you are. And I love that quote because it's like you're just seeing yourself in all these different ways. And
Yeah,
so, what you think is a pattern in your relationship is definitely going to show up in your business. So I tend to take a more holistic approach where, of course, people hire me to help them grow and scale their businesses. But, if someone tells me their relationship is the biggest challenge in their life, then I'm like, look, the best way that we can increase your revenue in your business is going into that and not just focusing on the business in a vacuum,
sure.
because that's going to be the biggest opportunity for growth in your business.
Yeah,
So it's collapsing some of that. And in terms of the identity thing, I think the key here is like I see these more as like lenses that we get to play with. And there's a big difference between holding an identity and being attached to an identity and using an identity as a way of kind of like bolstering our self-confidence because secretly deep down we don't feel like we're enough. So for me, it's like I am all of these things and I am none of these things.
yeah,
Who I really am is so much deeper than any one of these things. And when I know who I really am, which is deeper than any identity, then I can hold all these things and I can play all these things and I can kind of weave in and out of these different roles that I have in my life. And I can use the tool of identity to be able to help me grow without it becoming a prison and without it being something that I feel like I need to like grip or hold on to because secretly I feel like I'm not enough. So I need to
yeah,
show people how great I am,
yeah.
So I
Oh
think
yeah,
we
it's
can go
great
deeper
showing
than
those
that.
badges, isn't it? And it's great showing those
Yeah,
badges.
right. And the irony is like the more that I've been able to let go of that, and this has been a journey for me, the more success I've had, because it's like when you're trying to prove something, people
Yeah,
can't really feel you. There's not a
yeah,
real authentic connection, and that's something that often gets in the way of success in business is people who are and I have seen this in myself. It's like when I feel like I'm not enough, and then I feel like I need to tell everybody how great I am, basically.
Well, and it's interesting because when you think about this growth from within, the identity that you have, I mean, for me personally, September 8th, I had, a day like any other day, wake up on a Sunday, end up in the emergency room with a heart attack, and 4 days later had quadruple bypass surgery. And it's interesting because on my journey back, and I'm still, early on in my journey back into where I need to be. But the identity of I can't even believe. I had a heart attack. I can't even believe I had quadruple bypass. I can't even believe that I can say that out loud, that that happened to me because it's like an identity. And I noticed that when there's some limiting beliefs that travel with that, and one of them is like, you won't be able to do what you used to do. And so what I have to do, kind of what we talked about before, is I have to find people that have gone through this journey and have are able to say, I'm doing everything that I used to do. Yeah, it took a while, but I'm able to resume my life. It's even better now, blah, blah, blah. That's what I'm trying to find. So I think this identity piece is really like, I think you're onto something because we can identify as a broke business owner. We can identify as just barely getting by, always getting the short end of the stick. We can be a victim. I mean, there's a lot of that in that identity. Do you struggle, like you were talking about those limiting beliefs yourself? Let's just say you get one that pops in your brain, like whatever, pick whatever, whatever limiting belief comes in. How do you fight that? What are some things that you do, Jason, to be able to kind of really combat that so you don't live in that negative spot for very long?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is so many times in terms of the way that we relate to our internal experience, there is this kind of combative, like, how do I overcome or fix or solve or protect? We have this very aggressive way of working with our internal experience. And my experience, at least for me, as well as in mentoring entrepreneurs, is that tends to get in the way of actually, it's like the paradox is like the more you're trying to push something away, the more you're trying to fight something, the more it actually persists. So
Yeah.
the first thing is, I rather than being like combative, my invitation is always like curiosity, because
Mhm.
these stories, these beliefs, like they come from somewhere, and oftentimes they're actually there's some sense in which they're trying to do something useful for us, even though they might be misguided. For example, if like I'll give you a good example. So my dad, growing up, he was very successful. He made a lot of money, but he worked really hard. And so I used to watch him wake up at 4 o'clock every
Mhm.
day, and he used to work Sundays too. He would work 6 days a week. And so
Mhm.
my story subconsciously was, I can be successful, but I have to work really hard to do it.
Sure.
And so I played that out for the first part of my career. And I was working 6 days a week, and I used to work every Sundays. And I created a reality in which I was successful and I made a good amount of money, but I had to work really hard in order to shift that. And when
Sure.
I started becoming aware of this, I think the first thing is actually, and this is, there's different, the awareness is a big part of it, because oftentimes we don't even realize we have these stories. They're just like, they're how we see the world and what we think the world is.
Right.
So if your reality is making money is hard, which was my
Yeah.
reality for a long time,
Yep.
then you will create a world that just reflects that back to you.
Mhm.
And so you'll experience a reality in which, that's true. And so it can become very difficult to actually realize that this is just all a belief. And you can change the belief and then you can create a different experience.
Sure.
So many of us just think that's the way the world is. So I think the first thing for me that's been the most useful and the most helpful has been surround, and going back to what we were talking about earlier, one of
Yeah.
the things that's so powerful about mentorship or just being in communities of people who are operating at a different level is it starts to bring you up against those beliefs. Because the first time that going back to my close friend that I mentioned earlier, who was scaling that multi seven figure business,
Yeah.
he was working a lot less than me. And as
Mm.
he started making a lot more money, I was actually working harder than him in terms of like hours and time put in.
Yeah.
So that was the first time that I actually had that moment where I was like, okay, here's this person who's actually showing me a very different possibility, that it's actually possible to make a lot more money without working harder. And
Sure.
that was the first moment that I became aware that maybe there was this story that I was telling myself that wasn't true. So I think there's the first thing is awareness, right? It's like we have to come in contact in some way with the belief. and separate it out from our experience instead of what most people are just doing, which is living out all of these unconscious beliefs. And we don't even realize that all of the experiences that we're having are really just a result of these beliefs. So whether it's through mentorship or being in community or just starting to like do this work more intentionally, where you can start to actually just like sit down and like, what are my beliefs about money? And you just journal on it and you just start
Yeah,
writing out these different beliefs. And it's fascinating what you'll see. And then you can start going down that list and you can just start asking yourself, is this true? And where did I learn this? And is
sure.
there any evidence out there that is telling me a different story? Can I find one person, even just one person, who's showing me that maybe there's another possibility here, that maybe this belief isn't true? And
Yeah,
sometimes all it takes is just having a little bit of evidence to the contrary. And then you can start living into a new story and a new set of beliefs. So what I started realizing, over time, and I started shifting this narrative around money in my own life, it started. I had this. I was hanging out with this mentor one day, and he was like, "Do you make money or do you receive money?" And I remember this completely changed my life because
hmm,
my whole life I had this idea that I was making money, and it was very effortful, and I had to work really hard to do it. And he was like, my experience with money is it's just like air. I just open my mouth and I breathe, and there's air all around me, and air comes in and money flows. And this is a guy who was doing, like 10 million a year in sales. And I was like, huh, that's really interesting. So I started telling myself that story. And I was like, money is air. I don't need to work hard to make money. Money just flows through me. I can receive it. And
sure.
and my entire reality in business started changing because now I was telling myself a different story. And
Sure, sure.
my brain, my magical brain started coming up with all of these different ways that I could receive money that weren't tied to my effort
Yeah,
because now I was telling myself a different belief. So I think this is what it looks like. It's the awareness of just being able to notice these beliefs, which can happen in different ways. Oftentimes, it's through like whenever we get triggered by someone. I love
yeah,
getting triggered because I'm like, whenever I feel like I'm like, screw you, or this person's like, I want to push someone away. It's usually because they're bringing me up against my own limited identity structure.
gotcha.
So whenever I see someone who like is like in business who triggers me, I'm like, oh, this is good. I need to pay attention to this. There's something here for me. This person's showing me something, and maybe a
Sure,
new belief, a new story about myself that I want to reject because it doesn't fit my worldview. So it's
sure.
the awareness of being able to notice these beliefs and come in contact with them and then questioning them, like just asking yourself, is this true? Where did
Yeah.
I learn this? And then living into a new story and having the
Oh,
courage to sometimes just try that on
yeah.
and to act as if a new belief was true, even before you have a bunch of evidence to be able to confirm it. And that again and again and again for me in my own
Sure.
life has completely changed things. And it's often the thing that I think is, behind most of the growth that I experience and witness with the entrepreneurs that I mentor.
Well, I'll tell you what, this is a great question that you bring up as we start to land the plane today. What story are you telling yourself that isn't true? I mean, if you get nothing else out of what Jason and I talked about in the last 35, 40 minutes, is realistically think about that. What story are you telling yourself that isn't true? And again, for personal observation right now, what's entering my mind on a regular basis is dealing with the fact that you're less like once you go through this heart thing that I went through, it's like, man, they tell you right up front, you're gonna be every pain, every itch, every little, you know, um, thing that goes on in your body, you're going to be so ultra sensitive about. So it's like, oh my gosh, my toe hurts. And then right away it's like, see, yeah, that's going to happen. Now, all this stuff
Yeah.
comes in, and it's the story that I'm telling myself. So what I'm hearing you say and what I'm loving is, tell yourself a different story that aligns with where you want to be. And I love that piece because you know, that story is gonna really take a lot of people down if it's a bad story, if you're telling a bad story. And if your friends, again, go back to what you talked about before, if all your friends around you are telling that bad story, you know, it's like bad. Get out of that, whatever that is, get out of that spot because, I would have never, I don't think I would have ever wrote my um, Amazon #1 best-selling book if I wouldn't have had 5 people in my phone that had done that before. So, it is, what encouragement would you have for people that are struggling to rewrite that story for them? What are some simple things that you've had success in rewriting your story?
It's hard. I mean, it really is because you're coming up against a lifetime of programming. There's a lot of fear oftentimes underneath like letting go of these narratives and these pieces that we've just had through childhood. Our parents passed down these things to us. We don't even realize like how deep it goes. So if you're
Yeah.
struggling with it, I would say you're welcome to the club.
Yeah.
This is why it's easier to, just focus on the outside all day. But it's like,
Right, exactly.
I used to have this funny analogy. And I don't experience this much anymore, but I used to, one of my things in business, I would get very focused on like the details. And I used to laughingly say I was really good at rearranging deck chairs on the sinking Titanic. And
Sure.
I'd be the one who was just trying to make the deck chairs right when like really I should have zoomed down and been like, the ship is sinking, like we need to
Right.
focus on the
Yeah.
ship, not the deck chairs. And
Right.
so, I think the reality is most of us are more comfortable just like rearranging deck chairs all day because it
Right.
feels like it gives us a sense of control, and this other stuff is more uncomfortable. But it's really where I think the biggest opportunity for growth is. And it's hard. It's hard. So I want to normalize that. And I think it's just as simple as like starting small and taking maybe one area of your life. And just like we were talking about before, I think money is a great place to look at because
Yeah.
money is like your relationship with money is underneath almost everything that you experience in your business.
Hmm.
And I mean, the amount of stories that we have around money, around what money means, around, what it means to sell, around what we have to do in order to receive money. This is like such a fruitful area of exploration. So if
Sure.
we were really starting like small, I would just say, open up a document on your computer, grab a notebook, and just journal on like what are some of the stories that I have around money? What are some of my beliefs around what it takes to make money, or my beliefs around money as a thing, like, money is the root of all evil, or money is hard, or money is, people who make a lot of money are greedy, or all these stories that can come up around this. And
Sure.
that would be a really good place to start. And then you just, you start there, and you start getting curious about these things, and over time you can expand it to more and more areas of your business and your life. But it can really be simple to start, and just taking one little piece and starting there, I think can be really powerful.
That's great. Well, you use the J word twice in an hour journaling. Most men are not into that kind of stuff. But find a way if you're not into journaling, if you don't like to type on your computer, write in a notebook, whatever, maybe it's on your drive home, rather than listen to the business news or download of whatever, rather than go there, why not just think about what your relationship is to Jason's point with money?
Yeah, or call
I
up a friend and, have a
yeah,
conversation. Just be like, hey, I'd love to, one of your entrepreneur buddies, just be like, hey, I'd love to have a conversation around like how you see money, and what are some
yeah,
of the stories that you had like growing up around money. And man, that stuff, that'll make you more money than anything else.
yeah. Wow, that's
Or you could stay
fantastic.
stuck in strategy all day.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it does. Again, it does feel like the nice part about strategy is that you generally can cross it off your list, and then you can look back and go, look, I got a whole list of stuff that I did today. And I'm like,
Yeah.
whew, good job. And then meanwhile, nothing's changing internally. It's hard. I don't do, last question before I ask for your tip of the day. Do you think that you are ever at a spot where you can cross out that I'm done growing from within. I can cross that off my list. I'm done. I've reached the end of the internet, so to speak. For you personally, do you feel like you're closer to that, or is this just going to be a lifelong journey that will never really end, find the end of the internet, so to speak?
Is a lifelong journey. And I think it's the thing that I love most about entrepreneurship. I've always said this about being an entrepreneur, that the thing that I love most about the journey of entrepreneurship is who I get to become along the way. I see it as this beautiful vehicle for personal growth and transformation. And because I see it that way, I mean, I love just the craft and the art and the science of entrepreneurship and strategy and all of those pieces as well. And the deepest thing for me is that I use it as a tool through which I get to grow and work on myself. And that journey continues throughout, your entire life. So I think the moment you stop looking for a moment to arrive and the moment it's like there is no arrival, it's just this
Yeah,
endless unfolding, that's when I think it actually becomes a lot more fun because you're not just driving to a finish line all the time
sure,
and you're able to really enjoy the journey of unfolding. So yeah, it's an endless journey into more. And that's the
sure.
beauty of life and what the journey of entrepreneurship really can be.
Well, and I think there are some people listening based on we do a ton of work with DISC, the personality profile assessment. There's a lot of people that it's all about the destination. It's not about the journey. So, we got for somebody listening right now that's like, oh, it's all about the journey. Some people are like, heck no, it's about the destination. I'm trying to get to a destination on my vacation. I'm flying there, I'm driving there as fast as I can, whatever. It's not about, hey, let's take our time and meander through, some country roads type of thing. So for that type of person, and this might be a hard question for you to answer because you're not built that way, but for people that are built that way, where it's destination, that's where I'm going, and I don't want to really jag around and waste much time on the journey, so to speak. How do you help them, understand their identity and get curious? How do you help them? Because they're all about the results. They just want to be done with it. How do you help that
Yep.
person?
My high D's.
Yep,
I love it
exactly.
because I'm also actually a high D. So, and I love the disc profile. I used to use it a lot when I was director of sales. I think the paradox I've found in my own journey is that the harder I'm pushing to get somewhere, the longer it actually takes.
Okay.
And the
So it's
more
not
that
anything quick.
what'd you say?
It's not anything quick. This isn't like I can cross this off my list for this
No,
afternoon.
it's
Yeah.
and you can still drive like towards results and achieve a lot of things. And the paradox is the less attached you are to getting somewhere, the more things unfold in a way where you're actually able to accomplish and achieve much more. Because oftentimes what gets lost in that drive towards like when you're so fixated on a goal and an outcome, number one, I think you often miss like the opportunities for creativity and for a way of getting there that might be different from what you expect. But if you're a little bit more open and a little bit like less fixated on that, like
Yeah.
it needs to be exactly this, it's like your
Sure.
mind will come up with 20 other ways that maybe are like 10 times faster.
Gotcha.
And so that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, I mean, there's a lot of carnage, I think, that happens in that like very tight fixation around a goal that tends to, especially in entrepreneurship, we tend to kind of, create more of like these transactional relationships with clients and things like that, which can actually get in the way of like real growth over an extended period of time. So I'm all for results and I love, driving revenue and being able to like really push for growth. And at the same time, I think it's the paradox I've found is it's the ability to hold the outcome, but to also be like fully here and present with the journey. And it doesn't mean you let go of the outcome. It's not like you're
Sure.
just like, I don't care about that. It's more like, okay, I can hold that lightly And I'm still focused and intentional about how I make my way to that destination, but I'm not so attached to it that I'm missing what's right in front of me right here, right now.
Gotcha. Well, and that's where I think a lot of people miss what's sitting right in front of them right now. They're always looking for something down the road. So that's a great comment for hopefully somebody that's listening right now that's just always looking way in the future, you know. Can't wait for retirement, can't wait for this, can't wait for that. It's like, man, there's so much right now in front of you, you know. It was crazy for me that I was in the hospital for like 7, 8 days. I don't remember, nine, whatever it was. And I never even once turned the TV on. And it was interesting because I've never been in the hospital since, like we told you before, about since I was had my tonsils out when I was 6 years old. So I always watch these people on TV. I'm like, man, I'd be bored stiff in that room. And it was so interesting because there were so many other things going on. So I was always something was always happening. And I was like, what's going on right here, right now? Let's get through this before we have to worry about that. And I think if you look too far in the future, you can really get jammed up pretty bad in that. So I greatly appreciate that personally for me. One last question, I'll let you go, Jason. What would your tip of the day be for somebody listening today? Maybe it's something we covered already. Maybe it's something that we haven't. But what's in your heart to share for the tip of the day today?
I would say the most powerful, practical takeaway that you could integrate to really grow and expand your business is ask yourself, what do I want? Maybe you're at 6 figures, you want to make 7 figures. And then really holding that identity. And like, for example, I love just like having an identity question that I'll live into. So like, what decision would I make if I was already making 7 figures? And I'll just
Yeah,
put a little sticky note on my desk. And as I'm moving through my day, I will ask myself that question. What would a 7 figure entrepreneur do right now? How would a 7 figure entrepreneur lead their day? How would a 7 figure entrepreneur show up to this sales call or this interview? And just living into that identity. And it is the most powerful way that I know to create change and expansion in a
excellent.
business.
That's awesome. And for people that are stuck on that spot and want to learn more about you, want to connect with you, want to reach out to you, what's the best way for people to connect with you, Jason?
Yeah, you can go to jasonmoss.com. That's my website. And we've got a podcast called The Transmission where I'm dropping daily downloads that are like super focused, actionable, practical tools and tips that can help you grow. We've got our collective mastermind that you can learn more about there. Lots of different ways you can plug in, but that's the hub. So I would definitely go check that out, jasonmoss.com. That's MOSS.com.
Awesome. JASONMOSS.com is the spot. We didn't even get to talk about your business community. There's so many things, but we ran out of time. So thank you so much for hanging out with us. And again, for the listener, rather than jump into your next activity, really go and consider just sitting for a minute and just letting this sink in. And what's one thing that you're going to take away from this, and then put that into action. I hate seeing people listen to 20 podcasts a day and they can't remember anything that they learned. So again, just be intentional with this information because it can help you with your business growth. But as Jason said, it does start from within. So thanks for unpacking that with us, Jason. And I can't wait to keep learning from you. And just thank you for everything that you're doing in this space. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate you, brother. Thank you for the opportunity.